In this video, we'll discuss the #1 cause of inflammation and how you can make this change to transform your health forever. Hey Wellness Warrior, I'm Dr. Zyrowski, and the fact is when we look at what is causing inflammation in our life and all the negative health consequences associated with it, it all comes down to our diet. And I know what we have to do at this point is break that down further so that we can truly understand what in our diet is the pro-inflammatory foods that is driving us into a state of disease but not better health. And we're going to start with your common cooking oils. Now, many of the common vegetable oils are the ones that you may have in your home and are also the same oils that are used in restaurants. And the problem with them is that they have very high omega-6 fatty acid content and they have low omega-3 fats. Now, a diet consisting of highly imbalanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio promotes inflammation in your body and breeds inflammatory diseases like heart disease and also cancer. So think about this for a second. The reason that you feel so much better if you go and you take omega-3s is simply because you're balancing out the ratios. Because if you're consuming a whole bunch of pro-inflammatory omega-6 seed oils, the reality is you take the omega-3s, you bring that ratio closer together, you feel better. It lowers inflammation in the body. So therefore, we actually can just combat this by avoiding these oils altogether so we don't have this problem. Some of these top oils you should avoid are polyunsaturated oils like cottonseed oil, grapeseed oil, safflower oil, corn and sunflower oils, and beware of these because they're the most often used both in the home and in restaurants. They're cheap, so therefore many people buy them. Now let's talk about produce, okay? Now produce is a topic of huge controversy whenever I say that produce is something that is causing inflammation in your body. In fact, I just released a video on Instagram recently and people went crazy over it because they're saying, how in the world can you say produce is unhealthy for you? But hear me out on this. The analysis based on produce samples tested by the US Department of Agriculture found that strawberries and spinach contained the highest amounts of pesticide residues. One sample of strawberries, for example, tested positive for 20 different pesticides, and spinach contained nearly twice the pesticide residue by weight than any other fruit or vegetable. So when I said on Instagram that both spinach and strawberries were unhealthy because they were covered with pesticides, people went crazy. Some of the arguments were that, well, there's no proof of this, it's only in low doses, a lot of the idea that this could cause disease is only speculation. Well, let's talk about some of the other fruits beyond just strawberries and spinach. There's also kale and collard greens, mustard greens, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell peppers and hot peppers, cherries, peaches, pears, celery, and tomatoes. This is referred to as the dirty dozen. Basically, what was identified is these are the top fruits and vegetables that are most highly sprayed, most pro-inflammatory. And they're not pro-inflammatory because of what they are in nature. It's what man has done to it. So the big argument is that many of the different government agencies are saying it's completely fine to consume these different chemicals on your food. Here's the reality. Billions of dollars in lawsuits have been won against these companies for putting these types of chemicals in people's bodies and causing cancer. Now, it's not speculatory if in the courtroom these companies are being sued billions of dollars, because lawsuits for billions of dollars aren't won on speculation. And so we have to make sure we're avoiding these nasty pesticide-covered foods. Now, what we want to do when we think about inflammation, what is it actually doing in our body? Because we think, well, okay, these foods are bad, they're causing inflammation, but what is the inflammation actually doing if it's in a chronic, low-grade state for a long period of time? Well, it's associated with fatty liver disease, and over time, if the inflammation isn't stopped and it goes unchecked, it can actually even lead to liver cirrhosis, liver cancer, and liver failure. You have problems like endometriosis associated with inflammation, which a lot of young women are facing today. It causes a lot of pain and discomfort. Type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes mellitus. We also have issues with irritable bowel disease. When this inflammation goes to the gut, that's what happens. Asthma is a huge issue, rheumatoid arthritis, obesity, and cancer. So as this inflammation travels to different areas of the body, it causes different problems. But long term, those are some of the main issues that people are facing. So thus far, we've only talked about foods that are really unhealthy for you, but let's talk about this week's video sponsor, and that is Bee Patagon honey. Do you want honey that's a superfood with superpowers? Then you need to know about Bee Patagon honey. Bee Patagon honey comes from the pristine Patagonian forests of Chile, one of the few places in the world that hasn't been contaminated by man. Bee Patagon honey is starkly different from the more well-known Manuka honey, which comes from New Zealand, where glyphosate is heavily used and has been found in the Manuka honey. In fact, there's been so much glyphosate in Manuka honey that Japan threatened to stop importing it if they don't get it under control. So Bee Patagon honey guarantees purity and medicinal grade. Unlike Manuka honey, which is measured to fight off only one bacterial strain, Bee Patagon honey is analyzed to fight off 4 different bacterial strains, and that's why it's healing. In fact, research has proven it to have a greater antibacterial activity than Manuka honey, making it the best medicinal honey that you can find. We use Patagon honey for energy boosting, natural cough therapy, immune system boost, and also wound healing. Let me tell you, my family actually really loves the creamy texture and amazing taste of Bee Patagon honey, and I think you will too. And because I know that you're gonna love it, Bee Patagon honey is offering you 30% off coupon code for all their medicinal honey. So I invite you to try Bee Patagon honey and use this amazing coupon code Dr. Nick to save 30% today. This stuff is really good and I'm a big fan. Use coupon code Dr. Nick to save 30% on Bee Patagon honey, honey that heals. Now switching back to the pro-inflammatory foods, we're gonna look at dairy, okay? Now there's a big discussion out there as to whether or not dairy should be consumed or not. In the natural health community, many people are saying, well, if it's non-homogenized and it's not pasteurized and it's from, a good quality, healthy, humanitarian raised cow, then dairy is completely fine. But the problem is, if you are sensitive to dairy, then you're sensitive to dairy and there's nothing you can do about it. A major protein component of cow's milk is bee casein. The most frequent variants in dairy herds are A1 and A2 casein. Research studies have showed that milk containing A1 beta casein promotes intestinal inflammation and exacerbated gastrointestinal symptoms. And so if you are going to be consuming milk, you at least want to be getting the A2 milk. It's going to be the better option. But once again, if you are sensitive to dairy, and one of the ways that you can tell is drink a glass of milk on an empty stomach. So fast for 8 hours, 16 hours, drink a glass of milk. What's the response? Is it bloating, diarrhea, gas, irritation? Then you're sensitive to milk. And that's how you would know. Let's talk about another pro-inflammatory food, and that's the food additives. We've heard a lot of warning about consuming diets rich in processed food. One reason is because it contains MSG. Now, MSG has been linked to aggravating inflammatory symptoms in those with existing conditions such as chronic asthma. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding many of these different processed foods that contain MSG. So chips are a good source, snack foods, many of the frozen meals, soups, processed meats, condiments, a lot of different noodle products, and also just prepackaged foods in general. We want to make sure that we are reading the labels and avoiding the MSG. And this brings us to our next inflammatory food, which is going to be refined sugars, okay? Because here's the reality of sugar. First of all, people consume way too much of it. There's a good chance you're consuming way too much of it. It's an estimated 125 plus pounds of sugar that the average person consumes yearly. Now, here's the other problem. In most developed countries, people are consuming a processed sugar, such as high fructose corn syrup, okay? It's not just like regular sugar, it's even worse because it has to go to the liver, it's processed differently, it creates more fatty liver problems and more blood sugar instability. Now we also have, dextrose, fructose, sucrose, maltose. Sugar is linked to inflammation, it's linked to obesity, it's linked to diabetes, it's linked to chronic disease. We got to avoid it because it certainly is going to drive inflammation in your body. And this is something we want to avoid. And I think one of the big things you have to look out for is like, what are the common signs of inflammation? Because this is important to be able to identify the inflammation appropriately to determine whether you have it. Sure, lab testing is good, but if you want to just take a quick inventory of yourself right now, here's some of the things you'd look for. Do you have frequent headaches or migraines? Do you have a joint or muscle pain? Okay, joint and muscle pain is a very common sign of inflammation. If you just walk around and you just ache all the time, It's inflammation. Digestive issues, and these will show up in the way of like gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, even acid reflux. We also want to be looking for issues like brain fog, poor memory, hard time concentrating, even having problems with mood issues and anxiety, like even depression as well. And the reason for this is because inflammation goes to the brain and causes things to go haywire. And then we also want to look for things like blood sugar instability, weight gain problems, inability to lose weight. That's a big problem. And then also skin issues showing up in the way of like eczema or psoriasis, and then seasonal allergies. Now, if you took a quick inventory of yourself and a lot of those things were red flags, then there's a good chance you have inflammation. You want to start avoiding these different foods we're talking about today and get your diet under control. And this next pro-inflammatory food is gluten, and it's probably one of the worst. Now, when gluten is consumed, the immune system jumps into action, causing inflammation. This inflammation can affect the body's organs and soft tissues. Now, there's a big argument out there, well, I don't have celiac disease, so why would I need to avoid gluten? The reality is that you may not have celiac disease, and so meaning that you can have gluten and not have some massive reaction. However, there's a good chance that you're having some low level of reaction that you're not even aware of, right? So what I'd recommend for you is give up grains, give up gluten for a couple weeks, give it 2 weeks, see how you feel. If you feel better, then there's your answer. And so we don't want to just look at these foods and say, oh, well, is my reaction so bad that it's devastating and that means I have to give it up? We also want to look at it's like, are we having small, low-level reactions driving inflammation every single day and causing us to feel very unwell, which essentially will lead to an autoimmune crisis or disease down the road. Now, we also want to talk about grass-fed meats, okay? Now, due to the conditions animals are raised in commercial meat production, the products are lower quality, they contain less nutrition, and have more inflammatory effects on the body. Specifically added meats because there's this huge war on meat right now, acting as if meat is bad. Meat causes heart disease, meat causes gastrointestinal problems. Everything's being linked to meat and is nonsense, right? If you buy good quality meat, that's the first step, right? But to say that meats, like red meats, are associated in causing all of these different health problems is ridiculous. Sure, they may be associated. So I would agree to that. They may be associated. But when you say associated, it's only because you had the meat and you also combined it with sugar and gluten and tons of artificial foods and every bad thing you could possibly eat. And they say, oh, was meat in the diet? Must have been the meat. No, it wasn't the meat, because it's not a scientific way to look at things. Many of these documentaries on Netflix really blame meat for everything. And the reality is that they never looked at all the other factors in the diet. It's like, sure, a modern civilization eats more meat, but they also eat a lot more crap too. I mean, we have all the fast food chains and all of that stuff. I mean, just because somebody ate a burger at McDonald's doesn't mean it was the meat's fault. What about the fake bun that it was on and the poor quality meat and the fries and all the other nasty stuff they ate with it? So we have to look at the whole picture and take everything into consideration. And that's how we truly make good decisions for our health. So your diet is the #1 reason that you have inflammation problems in your life. So get your diet under control and the inflammation problems will start to go away. If you enjoyed this video, watch this video right over here.